Welcome to the American Theater Wing seminars on working in the theater. These seminars are taking place at CUNY, the graduate center of the City of New York, the City University of New York, and they're right in the heart of Times Square. I'd like to say a word about the American Theater Wing. Most of you know, but for those who don't, it is the longest running theatrical organization in the United States. It was started with the premise of creative and talented people helping each other, sharing their knowledge with each other, and also with people who could not come to the theater but were involved in the theater. We are trying to continue that. We are best known perhaps for the Tony Awards, which was named in honor of Antoinette Perry. This talented woman believed mostly in quality, and the quality of theater and preparing for the theater was terribly important. Our seminars are based pretty much on that premise. There is as much talent as you could possibly find here on stage, and we also have talent in the audience, and both will share from each other. I'm Isabel Stevenson. I'm president of the American Theater Wing, and co-moderating the seminars will be Jean Dalrymple, who is perhaps one of the most qualified women in the theater. She has been a producer, a director, an author, and is a member of the board of directors of the American Theater Wing. Henry Hughes, who is a writer, a critic, and a director, also a member of the board of the American Theater Wing. They will moderate the panel. There will be a question and answer period at the end of our seminars. And if you have any questions, is there anything that you want to ask, try and think about them while the seminars and panels are being discussed so that you can be ready for the questions at the end. I will now turn this over to Jean and to Henry and to our panelists. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Isabel. On my far right, in that chair, is Raul Julia, and sitting next to him is Celeste Holm, and sitting next to her is
Barney Hughes.
Barnard Hughes.
He doesn't look like himself.
And they are all hoping to get here. Celeste is at City Hall. Raul never gets up before noon, and Barney is making a film. However, sitting on my right is Jane Alexander, who is currently starring in the first Monday in October, and at the same time, during the daytime, she makes a film called Kramer versus Kramer, which is about
child custody.
However, what she enjoys more than anything in life is coming to seminars. On my left is my co-moderator, Jean Dalrymple, who has, has produced over 100 shows, and who has written the Bible for those of you who have had to go through the task of getting jobs in the theater, called Careers and Opportunities in the Theater. And she's also written a community theater handbook, which, and she thinks that the community theater, that today's off-Broadway renaissance and the community theater are perhaps more related in their problems than one would suspect. So that while it's geared for community theater, it is a book that might be useful to those of you who are contemplating producing off-Broadway. Off-Broadway.
Yes.
Next to Jean is John Cullum, who is currently starring in On the 20th Century, and who before that starred in Shenandoah. And what I particularly like is that he did take the time, he had the courage about a year ago to leave the musical theater where he is very comfortable and go into a play called The Trip Back Down, which was one of the most interesting new plays we've had in the past few years. and which required him to act without singing. And I thought he did a great job on it. Next to him is the Rolls Royce of actors' agents, Milton Goldman. You know, you think of actors, whenever I run into Milton in London or somewhere, he's staying at the Savoy and living the life. But you also find him at out-of-the-way places like Olney, Maryland, when a new play is trying out, which requires a lot of uncomfortable travel, and he's a dedicated agent, and he's going to have a lot to tell us about how you get an agent. And of course, you can't have him. He'll tell you how to get another agent. And next to Milton is Reed Shelton, who is Daddy Warbucks in Annie. And it's hard to believe that the person who did the comic strip hadn't seen Reed before they drew Daddy Warbucks. I think that we might follow the procedure we did in a previous seminar, and that is to have each of the actors involved here simply say a little bit about how they came to, how they got the job in their current play, and it's sometimes not quite as easy as you think it is, and also what the principal acting task is in sustaining their performance night after night, or in creating the role that they have so brilliantly created. And Jane, since you're on my right, perhaps you could say something about...
Yeah, well, First Monday is about, I play the first woman Associate Justice on the Supreme Court of the United States. And originally, Jerome Lawrence and Robert E. Lee wrote it for a woman who was older than myself. I play Ruth Loomis, a little older than my actual age, but they had somebody older in mind. And Roger Stevens, who is a producer of the Kennedy Center and is a co-producer of the play, just suggested my name. And I'd worked with Henry Fonda before, and that set the wheels in motion, and everybody thought it was a good idea. They thought, in fact, I play a conservative and Hank plays an old crusty liberal, and they thought that having the age versus the younger woman also would be a good tension. So that's how I got the role, really, through Roger Stevens' recommendation. And my problem...
Isn't your husband the director?
Yes, well, that's true, too, but in fact...
But he was neutral about it.
No, it came about... Actually, Ed Sheeran is my husband. He's my favorite director as well. But we always like to work together. In fact, Ed is one of Henry Fonda's favorite directors, too, so it's not all as incestuous.
That's more incestuous.
And he's also one of Roger Stevens' favorite. It helps to know people in this business. The problems I have with the role is that there are no prototypes as yet for a first woman Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, as you probably all know. And she was a conservative. There were a number of women in this country who were very well qualified to be on the Supreme Court, but there were not any particular role models that I knew of who were not only qualified but were as conservative as Ruth Loomis, the character I play. So I pretty much had carte blanche, and I more or less created her without a particular person in mind. The constraints I feel about playing her have to do with the fact that I am a role model in this role for a lot of women. And that is something that I am aware of. I mean, I don't, and being the first woman Associate Justice has its limitations too, because I do feel that the President would choose somebody who is pretty safe, you know, as the first woman. Not, in other words, not somebody who's very eccentric in any way, yet.
Well, this woman is kind of eccentric. She likes to watch pornographic films.
No, she doesn't.
Well, you have a whole scene where you insist upon watching a pornographic film that of course, the other justices have decided that it's too much for them.
Henry.
Well, is it true or not?
She watches it out of a sense of duty and honor.
That's the same reason I go. John, would you like to say something about how you got the job and the acting?
Well, I really don't. I'm trying to think how I got the job. It was rather complicated. I think I kind of didn't inherit it, but they had tried about everybody else they could think of. And then I auditioned for the job, and it was a little more complicated.
I was going to say that you people think of you as a sort of the all-American type,
right?
And this is and the character you play here is not the type the character you usually play. He's more eccentric.
I wasn't going to tell this, but I guess I will tell it. If it gets back to Hal Prince, he'd probably fire me. But since Clear Day, which was 12 years ago, I've had a reputation as being probably the dullest actor.
Not true.
Well, and certainly Hal Prince thought that. He was talking to Alexis Smith in California about the difficulties of finding an American who could play high comedy and sing. This is the story that I got from Eric, my agent. And she suggested me. And he says, well, I don't think John has a good enough sense of humor. And she said, well, I think he's very good anyway. That got back to me because her agent is my agent. And so I had my agent send Hal some reviews that I'd gotten for things like School for Wives, Moliere, and El Capitan, a John Philip Sousa story, and Ladies Not for Burning. Some of the things that I did outside of New York, which were comic roles. And then I had to audition for him. Then I wasn't too keen about the play because when I read the play, I thought this is just, I don't think it'll work. And I really literally avoided Hal as much as I could. And finally, I did go and see him. And when he showed me the set, he kind of allayed my fears because I knew that was going to be the star of the show. That's pretty much it. And then, of course, by the time they got through putting a wig on me and a black mustache, nobody knew who I was. He never really thought I could.
And what is the principal acting task? Is it sustaining this? As you all know, on the 20th century is a wonderfully integrated show in terms of style, and you set that style at the very beginning. And I'm what is your principal task as you?
I watched a lot of old movies and imitated John Barrymore to do it. At least that's what everybody thinks, but that's not the truth. It's just the role lends itself to that. It's a very meager role in terms of the kind of humor that you would find in a well-written script. And when I talked to Hal, we agreed on that. And I said, I cannot play this role unless you'll let me go farther than what the words allow me to do, because he's not that humorous a person. I find the character of Oscar Jaffe to be almost devoid of real humor in the sense of being able to make fun of himself, which is a kind of humor that I like to play. This character barrels ahead, and he becomes funny because he's so outlandish and so driven and whatever that happens. And so that's the way I played him. Almost.
Well, he's based on your friend Jed Harris, isn't he?
Yes, originally.
Yes.
Yeah, he was the one that Ben Hecht and and Charlie MacArthur were writing about when they wrote the play.
Well,
Does Jed have much of a
Mulholland,
Yeah.
Bruce
Does Jed have much of a
Mulholland.
sense of humor?
Oh, yes, he's a very, very witty man.
Well,
By
maybe I
the way,
should say.
John, you seem much more able to be funny with Judy than you did with Madeline. You seem more comfortable with her somehow. I saw it both times. I saw it with Madeline, and I saw it with Judy Kay.
It seems like with Madeline, I try to lay back a little bit because her type of humor is so individualist. You know, she's got a quirky quality that really works very well. But I couldn't get too close to it, or I'd damage it, or I felt that way.
Yes.
And with Judy, I can be as strong as I want to, and of course Kevin gets stronger all the time.
Yeah.
May I 1 minute to welcome Celeste home to our town?
All right, well, I'm going to skip Milton for a minute because I want to come to him at the end. And I'm going to go to Reed and ask him the same question.
Well, I was doing a show in Washington called 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and we were in terrible trouble. And a man came down to help. And I was rehearsing at the National Theater, a scene that I was in, and I was determined that he was my replacement. And it was Thomas Meehan who wrote Annie. So the months go by, and I'm asked to audition, and it seemed that Martin Charnin had heard of me, and Charlie Strauss had heard of me, one thing and another. And anyway, I walked in and auditioned, and I was leaving for Greece, the country Greece, not the show. And I told him, and I suppose it was a great deal of chutzpah, I said, you know, you guys better make a decision because I leave on Monday for Greece. And about 4 hours later, they called, and they did indeed want me, and we made a deal, and I went up to the Goodspeed Opera House in East Haddam, Connecticut, where Annie was born. We worked about 4 weeks rehearsal period, and another 7 weeks playing, and we're supposed to come to Broadway, but there was no money. And some people had bought a option on it, and Roger Stevens at the last minute made it possible for Annie to be produced.
But tell them that, you know, up there it was not a hit.
Well, that's not quite right, Jean. That's,
Well,
no,
that's
really.
not-
A lot of people say that. And it's
Well,
not
I went
that.
up there, and, you know,
A lot of
although
people
that's a
didn't like
tiny
it, but
house.
to say it was not a hit, and it was a tiny house, but we were completely sold out. And it's a tiny house, I grant you. But the overall reviews said there's a show there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was, and that was why we went there, was to see that there
When
was
did
a
Mike
show.
No,
Nichols come
all I
into it?
mean is that all the pros that went up there came back and said it will never make it.
Well, there's
And-
one lady lost her job because she said that, who was that works for a very large organization. And the thing, I think, if you to get the thing that made Annie a success was Martin Charnin. I've never known a man, and I've told him this to his face, so I mean, it's almost as if he made a pact with the devil. He never gave up on this show.
Yeah.
Mike, you asked when Mike became involved. He came to see it, didn't want to come and see it. And Lewis Allen's wife, Jay, begged him to come, so they came one day, and he was very disgruntled, and he sat through it. And Martin met him afterwards and said, well, what do you think? He said, well, I like it, and I want to produce it. And that's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
That story is absolutely true.
When you auditioned, did you have hair?
I had hair. I played it with hair there. And I had replaced Keene Curtis in the Rothschilds on Broadway and shaved my head when I did that. And so I had some pictures with myself without hair. And Martin asked to see them, and they said, would you mind shaving? I said, well, if you shave it, you know, it's going to take a few weeks to get it back. He said, don't worry. And I waited. You talk about the money coming in at the last minute. I didn't shave my head till the bond was posted. Now, the problems I have in playing this role, everybody wants me to say it's the dog and the children. I don't play any scenes with the dog. The dog is the most amazing dog that I've ever known. I mean, I really mean that. He is a lazy hound, and he plays his part beautifully. Never misses a cue, never. One time, however, On his entrance, he did not get applause, and he merely did this. But working with children can be a problem, not because they're not actresses. It's because they're children. And their span of concentration is not as long as an adult. And you cannot expect a child to walk on stage and be perfect every performance. And it loosens you up as a performer. You must constantly be in a position to give something that's different than they're used to doing. And the little girl I'm playing with now is one of the sweetest childs will ever play with, named Shelley Bruce. So I'm very fortunate in that. The part of Daddy Warbucks, the problem was in the writing of it, because he was an arch conservative, which I didn't know. I just played him as a billionaire. I know all about that kind of thing, of course. But in a funny kind of way, you know, and I've said this before, I mauled him a bit after Roger Stevens. I really did. No. I don't know how wealthy Roger is, but he's obviously very wealthy. But he's a kindly, considerate, concerned man. And I don't think a billionaire is a bad thing. Has to be, or have to be bad.
But Reed, you didn't crumple your suit. There's a joke about Roger Stevens that before he leaves on a trip, he takes the suit he's going to wear and crumples it before he puts it in his bag.
He's the most unassuming man you'd ever meet, really. Darling man.
Celeste,
Don't be nervous about your question.
well, I don't have to say who Celeste Holm is, but she is going into a new show, and I wish you'd tell me the name of it, because it's something about a girls' school, isn't it?
It's called The Utter Glory of Morrissey Hall. It is indeed about a girls' school. And it's about a school. I asked Albert Selden and Arthur Whitelaw and Clark Gessner, who wrote and conceived and dedicated the whole thing. I said, is it current? Well, he said, yes, it's in the present, but the school has stood still. In some ways. You know, interestingly enough about this billionaire point, I don't know how many of you get bored enough to watch television, but every now and then, you know, it does happen. If I really want to take a nap, it's a very good way to do it. And I found myself in a Lucan, something about a boy who is partly wolf. And he's a nice actor. We had a good time. And he played it like your everyday wolf, you know. We were, I noticed something in the script. I was supposed to be terribly wealthy, which made me automatically a louse.
Yeah.
Yet everyone in the cast is doing their damnedest to become wealthy too. So they can become lice. Psychologically, this is very strange. It's very true. And in it's so nice to see a beneficent, benevolent person who has a dime. Or more than that, has $1 billion. Very nice, very nice.
But Annie does it, see. Annie does it too.
Now, the play that we're in, we are having an interesting problem right now. We're waiting to get a theater. We don't think it's nice to ask the backers to pay for rehearsal unless we know where we're going at the end of the 4 weeks. I, of course, have enormous courage and would take a chance. But they don't think we should, so we're waiting and vocalizing a lot.
May I interrupt once more? Can I bring Raul Julian on the stage?
Here comes the man with the microphone, yes. I didn't know when you asked me about my current job whether you meant what I was doing at City Hall, because that's something else.
No, that's another kind of acting.
Yeah, I'll say. I'm trying to say
Raul?
Town Hall.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. No, it's good afternoon, right? Not yet.
Not yet, no.
Have you turned on your Betamax and...
No, I have an RCA.
As you know, Raul Julia is now playing Dracula, and just before he went into Dracula, he delighted many of us with, I think, the lustiest and most all-out performance as Petruchio in Taming of the Shrew that I've ever seen.
Thank you.
There's a line in the show about I woo not like a babe, and I think that you must have taken that as the spine of your performance.
Yeah.
Could you say something about either that production or the Dracula, saying how you came to be cast in that particular role and how you got the job, and now that you have it, what are your main problems in performing it?
How I got Dracula?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I got Dracula, the producers called me on the phone and they asked me if I wanted to do it. And I said I would like to see it first. And they invited me to see the show. I saw it and I said, I'll do it.
Did they say why they thought that you would be the logical person to play it?
No, they didn't. But I imagine, I don't know, I think probably they saw me in Three Penny Opera or something like that, and they thought, well, maybe they got the idea from there to do Dracula. They never told me. This is my guess. They just asked me, and I said yes after I saw the show.
And once you got into the show, did it slip on like a glove, or did you have certain problems with the style that Dennis LaRosa is using in the show?
No, it slept on like a glove.
You're leading the You're leading the witness.
I had a small problem with the cape. That was my biggest problem, actually. Handling that cape was more difficult than when I saw Frank do it. I saw Frank and I said, ooh, that's going to be a breeze. I'm Spanish. I should be able to handle a cape. But
Without the bull, you were lost.
How about mastering the Transylvanian accent?
I didn't know I had one.
I know that when you're in some of the shows that you've done with Three Penny, you have done work on your speech because you have a natural Spanish intonation.
Yes.
And in fact, I've talked to your speech coach, and he tells me that he's always amazed because usually when a speech coach gives actors notes on their speech problems, that they're very lucky if they can correct one or two. And I think he gave you something like 20 notes, and you came back with 18 corrected. And he felt that this showed a kind of earnestness in the work that he doesn't usually find.
Yes, that's true. That's Timothy, right?
Yes.
Tim
Monic.
Tim Monic. He's a very good teacher. Yeah, I'm very. That's one of the things that I really like. I'm always concerned about that, and you wouldn't know by hearing me speak now, but I have a script. I can practice more because I know what I'm going to say beforehand. So, but I do. I'm very. That's one of the things that I really like to get down, and I'm very keen on it. Very serious about it.
Are you still working with your voice coach?
I haven't in a while, and I'm going to call him and start working again.
As an actor, I've always been interested. It's difficult to think of pronunciations and inflections as you're acting because it's something not in the role. So that
I don't find that true at all.
You mean that you say here comes
the character takes the role, and then the speech becomes appropriate to the character.
But let us say, Celeste, for example, that you have a glottal stop, and when you say the word England, you say it England instead of England, which is the correct way to say it. Now, suppose that a speech coach has told you that you have been saying it incorrectly. I find that actors will tend to say I can't think about, when I come to that word England, saying it correctly, because I'm thinking about the whole speech.
Well, I think one day they could devote to thinking of that. And then once it's thought of, then it ought to stay there.
In other words, once you've given yourself the right pronunciation, then...
Yes, it should be there, yes.
Do you feel that way, Raul?
Well, yes, I practice a lot before I go. During rehearsals, I'm always drilling the lines so that I don't have to really think about it during performance. During performance, I don't know what I do. I just do it. And I'm not thinking, well, sometimes I do. Sometimes it varies every time, but I do drill the lines like crazy before the performance, before performance time, before opening, so that then I don't have to really worry about it. And if I do, at one point during the performance, concentrate on the speech as I am doing the performance, that's just a whim. And rather than I have to get it right, that kind of thing.
That's very good.
Well, in Dracula, you don't have to worry about it, do you? Because I think that any accent would fit.
Yeah, anybody can be a vampire.
I think we'd like to turn now to Milton.
Kid like that.
Henry, can I just say one little thing?
Sure.
I think that Spencer Tracy's admonition when an actor said, what's the most important thing to do to be a good actor? And he said, learn your lines. This was not as lightweight a piece of instruction as it sounds, because it's perfectly true that if you really know your lines so that they are so much a part of you, they become a part of you, and then you can do anything in the world with them. But if you actually ever have to say, what do I say next? Out the window in every way. And that's really the main problem with all amateur productions, is the three people never really know their lines.
Celeste, you try to learn your lines before the first rehearsal?
No, only with Shakespeare. But with most speech, I find that the performance grows out of the emotional content and reaction with the other actors.
At what point in the rehearsal, say it's a 3-week rehearsal period, at what point do you, leaving Shakespeare out, do you feel that you should know your lines?
It depends upon how well written the script. If it's well written, you know them like that. I can learn Arthur Lawrence in 3 days. His speech is his writing is so natural and so perfect. Shaw is difficult, but once you get him, there's no possible other way to say what he has written. Very interesting.
I think we ought to turn now to Milton, who is, I want first to ask him a couple of things about being an agent. Then I know all of you have questions about how you get an agent and how you attract the eye and the ear of the agent. Milton's clients are, well, 2 or 3 people here are your clients, and Laurence Olivier is your client, and he's I never send anybody to you because it's hopeless to add to your galaxy.
Not true.
Not true at all.
Robert Lewis sent me a young girl up at Yale named Meryl Streep, became a client. I see a lot of young people.
Did you see Meryl do something before you?
No, I took her really on, one, the way she looked when she walked into my office, and 2, on Bobby's recommendation. He told me she was the most talented student he'd ever had up at Yale, and he said there was no limit to what you do. And that, of course, is proven true.
Would you agree, Raul, about Meryl's talent?
Definitely. There's no limit to what she can do. She's brilliant.
She is.
It's a joy and a great experience working with her. I hope we can do a lot of more plays together.
I first saw Raul in a play by Jack Gelber called The Cuban Thing. What year was that, Raul?
That was 1960.
Anyway, I was enormously impressed with his performance. Even then, at the beginning...
1968 or something.
Was that the first play?
I don't believe.
Was that the first play you did in New York?
It was my first Broadway play. And I remember, you saw me then, and I went to visit you at your office at that time. The play didn't do so well, but it was very good for me.
Wonderful for you.
the Cuban thing.
No, but even then, one saw in Raul the making of a very important Broadway actor, motion picture, television, all the rest of it. One recognized his talent. And when Henry said, how do you go about finding people, there are all sorts of unlikely places. You never know. I try to cover plays out of town, off Broadway. I send members of my department to graduating classes, to student demonstrations. Because, as I say, I went up to Yale and saw a performance of The Revenger's Tragedy, a Jacobean melodrama. And there was an actor named James Norton who became a client of the office and immediately went into The Web and the Rock, which Jose Ferrer was directing off Broadway, and he's done very well. But the actor's problem, of course, is getting that showcase and then getting the agents to come down and see the actor perform. Sometimes you will read a notice. For instance, the Phoenix recently had a play called Getting Out, which had come via the Louisville Theater where John Jory had directed it. Then it went to the Mark Taper and was recently at the Phoenix. The casting director of the Phoenix, a girl named Bonnie Timmerman, for whom I have great respect, called and said, the girl playing the lead in this is extraordinarily gifted, and I think you ought to come to see her. Well, I was unable to go myself, but I did have someone from my department, and the girl is coming to the office and becoming a client. I think through reviews, and most of the plays are covered today by the second string critic off Broadway or the third string critic, whatever it might be. If there is a notice that is sufficiently exciting, I will make it a point to get someone to cover that performance. And very often I, quite incidentally, will go to see a client down at Princeton. I went to the McCarter Theater Saturday night and saw the Aspern Papers. And you never know that in a small part, a young actress or young actor may turn up who you find exciting or interesting, and then you invite her into the office and you try to see what can be done, helping her get her start in the business. And that's what makes the business continually exciting. I went downtown to the Lincoln Center Repertory Company many years ago when it was still down at NYU, and I went to see a production directed by William Ball, who's now head of ACT, of Tartuffe. And the late Michael Sullivan was playing Tartuffe, and Salome Jens was playing Elmire. It was a preview, and Salome Jens was out ill, and her understudy went on. And I was very enchanted with her performance. And I went back and said, I want to congratulate you, you were splendid. And the next day her manager, she already had a manager, called me, and she came to my office and became a client, and that was Faye Dunaway. So you never know. I mean, Shirley MacLaine became a star as an understudy, and Judy Kay more recently.
Well, how many people can you represent without not remembering their names?
I think that's an unfair question.
Yeah, but I remember everybody's name.
But I mean,
He's extraordinary. He really is extraordinary with the names.
But can you represent as many talented people as you'd like to?
Well, I don't think there's a limit, Henry, only because there's an attrition within an office. Some people you believe in never quite make it. It goes on, and then they feel the combination of the agent and the actor is not working, and they should move on, perhaps get a fresh viewpoint from another agent. Some take off, and then the phone starts ringing, as did for Raul, and said, you know, we want you to play this part. And then, of course, the actors say, I don't need an agent anymore, and they get a lawyer.
Since Mr. Goldman is going to have to leave shortly, I would like to, anyone who has a question about agents, could ask it now. Yes. Could you stand up, please? Oh, come. I don't know whether you can reach the microphone now.
If anyone has a question, if they could come to the microphones either on the right or left-hand side of the stage, it'll be on the monitor so the other people can hear it, and you also will.
Good big voice.
But in
Or
the
doesn't he
meantime,
just speak out?
I'd like to ask, what are the steps that came in between Milton seeing you and the producer calling you and saying, would you like to come do the part? Because that's the thing that's terribly important, all the years of working and being seen, and then finally getting to the point where someone calls you and says, would you like to do the part? It isn't that simple. And could you quickly or tell us because of the years and what you did and how you got?
It's only 10 years. You can
It was
do
only
that in a
about
few
10 years. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, but first, I don't think anybody should, after I say what I went through, say, well, you know, that's what's going to happen to me or anything like that, because you cannot really make rules out of this game. Some people might do it in less time, some people, all circumstances are different. So I can just tell you as a matter of curiosity, but it's not something that I don't think anybody should compare themselves with what's happened to me. What happens to each individual is very different. Some people come from, I don't know, Milwaukee or some place like that. They're here a year and they're starring on Broadway. You know, and sometimes, so what I'm saying is that sometimes I'm a little careful when people ask me, well, how did it happen to you? Because sometimes what they're thinking is, well, I'm going to, maybe that's the way it's going to happen to me. You know, and
no,
comparing doesn't work. Anyway, I don't remember what happened. I guess after the Cuban thing, I did a soap opera. I remember it was Love of Life, and I did that for about 4 months, and then I think that's when nothing happened after that, and there was nothing happening, and finally I called Joe Papp on the phone after pacing up and down my apartment for about half an hour to gather the courage to call Joe Papp, because at that time I didn't have the relationship that I have with him now, so Joe Papp was like the Pope or somebody. So finally I gathered the courage and I said, okay, hello, Mr. Papp, this is Raul Julia, and he recognized me because I had worked with him before in a Spanish version of Macbeth that was touring the playgrounds. It was a mobile unit that the Shakespeare Festival had in those days, and I played Macduff, and they brought a Mexican star to play Macbeth. His name was Ignacio Lopez Tarso. But anyway, it was great. Where was I? Oh, yes. I was in the playground. So, all right. So he had remembered me from there. He said, oh yes, Raul, how are you? And I said, wow, he remembers me. And I said, listen, I need a job. I don't care what kind of a job. I've tried other jobs outside of the theater, selling pens, selling magazine subscriptions, and I get fired all the time. I simply cannot work in other places except in the theater. It doesn't even have to be acting. I just want to be in the theater, somewhere in the theater. Give me a job. And I was kidding, and I said, I'm ready to kill myself, to commit suicide. So he said, well, don't do that because you're going to make a mess. Call me back in 10 minutes. I called him back in 10 minutes, and he had a job for me as a house manager for a production of Hamlet that he was doing, that pop Hamlet that he was doing at that time. And I was house manager. And from then,
how did you know how to be a house manager?
I only had to handle the ushers. That's all I had to do. All I had to do was be at the front of the house, take the tickets, and handle the ushers. You go over there, you go over there, you come today, tomorrow you come tomorrow, and all that.
Well,
great-looking ushers.
You were very lucky because Joseph Papp is a man of enlightened vision, and he allowed Raul to play many, many parts, which in the commercial theater he would never have gotten. He had him play Petruchio, he had him play in Two Gentlemen of Verona, so many roles that Raul could not possibly have hoped to get on Broadway. Now he can get them on Broadway, but it took Joseph Papp to show the way, because the Cuban thing was a sort of play that would have offered him. When they needed a Spanish actor or a Cuban actor, they'd call Raul.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Joe really gave me the opportunity to play.
But I think this is a place to make a very important point. Raul Julia, with his name, would immediately, in the minds of agents, producers, directors, conjure up the Latin and a Spanish role or a foreign role. I represent a young actress named Tova Feldshuh, with a very Hebraic name. And Tova is very concerned at this point the name is going to limit her, and it has limited her. She played Yentl and got a Tony Award nomination for Yentl, and now she's offered Jewish parts all the time. And we have striven to break the identification, and with that name it is tough, but we have done it, and she's now going to star on Broadway in a new musical, Sarabah, in which you will play a Brazilian lady.
Oh, great.
It's based on the movie Donna Floor and Her Two Husbands, on the novel and the movie, Jorge Amado. And she's in Rio now gathering up atmosphere for it.
Can you get Raul a Jewish part?
Raul has played a Jewish part. Raul, the king of the schnorrers.
I was the king of schnorrers.
Absolutely. He played the king of the schnorrers.
We have a question here from Milton Goldman on some of the problems of agents.
Yes. In the beginning, in the opening statement that Miss Alexander made, she said, it helps to know people in the business. Now, for a young actor just coming into New York, the person to know in the business is the agent. Yet, in my experience, agents are almost unapproachable in no matter what aspect you do, whether you leave a picture resume, whether you try and make a phone call, or whether you try and get into a showcase. A lot of them just don't want to be bothered. Now, in my opinion, I would rather not just leave a picture and resume in an office. I would rather talk to someone for 2 minutes, at least shake his hand and meet him face to face. Now, how can you tell really what's behind a person just by that picture and resume? Wouldn't you rather meet someone face to face?
Well, as an actor, I understand your frustration of not being able to meet the agent, but if you were where I sit, behind my desk, actors would take up 24 hours a day waiting in line down the block to see you, and you would never get a chance to make a telephone call to try to get a job for a client.
And you're always on two phones at once anyway.
Absolutely. It is impossible. I think there is an equity ruling that agents must set aside a certain period of time to see new young actors. I would check that out. I'm pretty certain that's true. And I know
one afternoon a week.
In our office, we do see people. We usually ask them to send in a picture and a list of credits or whatever to get an idea of their background. I mean, if they're just starting out in the business and have had no background whatsoever, then we're not the agency for them, because at our level of operation, we need more important actors or somebody we suddenly think has got it and is going to really take off.
Would you say what your agency is?
It's International Creative Management, which is one of the 2 largest agencies in the world, the other being William Morris Agency. And it's just impossible to see all the actors I would like to see. I feel very warmly toward actors. I love them, and I've enjoyed being an agent for these many years, and I would be happy to see as many. But if I did that, I certainly couldn't do justice to my clients who've signed with me and who are expecting me to help them earn some money so they can pay their rent.
I understand the agent's problem, and I can sympathize with you, but exactly how much can the agent tell from just that picture and resume? I mean, granted, there's a lot of people that say you can talk through a picture, but exactly how much can you really get through that?
Well, you get the surface, the superficial things. You see what they look like, for one thing. You look in the back, you see how tall they are. The boy or girl who has a physical advantage gets a much quicker start in the business than the character actors who find it takes much longer time, as Reed will tell you.
That's not fair. I was a juvenile. I was.
With hair.
I'll tell you that story.
Is that still true today, that one must be very good-looking?
No, it's not true.
It's changing.
It is changing, and right now you have a great many actors in motion pictures who are certainly not the conventional arrow-collar ad.
But Milton, you never would take an actor as a client just by looking at his picture.
No, but what we might do, if the picture looked interesting enough, if the credits looked interesting enough, the training, for instance, they'd been at the Guthrie, or if they'd been at ACT, or they'd done some regional work. You see, I think one of the mistakes here is that too many young actors in this country think they can come right out of school and get a job on Broadway. In England, I think they have the right idea. When you graduate the Royal Academy or the Central School or any of the training schools, no agent will take you, no matter what you look like. If Marlon Brando walked in or anybody else, he would say no. Go away, go to a repertory company, have a year or two of rep. Unfortunately, in this country, we don't have the kind of repertory situations they do in England, but we do have Theater Authority, TCG, a theater communications group, which will help you when producers and directors from regional theaters come to New York to help you audition for them. And hopefully you can get a job working with the Alley Theater in Houston, or the Arena Stage in Washington, or ACT in San Francisco, or the Guthrie, or the Long Wharf. There are so many regional theaters that are growing up, and I think that's one of the healthiest things that has happened to our theater.
But the TCG auditions aren't open to everyone either. You have to be recommended by the head of the drama department.
No, I think
there's
anyone
two different ones.
Oh.
There's
Do you know about TCG?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Well, tell Jane, because I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm on the board of TCG. So there's the national auditions, which are held in different places now, but Chicago's one of the main places.
What does TCG stand for?
The Theater Communications Group. It's the liaison organization between all the LORT theaters. That's the League of Resident Theaters, and it's now about 161 theaters are members of TCG across the country. Anyway, there's the national auditions, which is a student audition. You have to be recommended by somebody in your university or college, or somebody in the theater. You have to have a recommendation. And then there are if you're in New York, then you just call up TCG, and they will let you know where the auditions for the theaters are going to be. That's separate. You don't have to have a recommendation at all. And I'm not sure whether you have to be a union member or not. That I don't know.
I think there's both kinds of calls. I think there's non-union calls
And union calls, yeah.
How did you start, Celeste?
How did I start? I graduated from high school, went to New York, and got a job in 2 weeks.
That's what I just said.
But I
There were
want to
30
say,
theaters in New York, 40, 50 theaters, and there were 3 shows, well, not that many, but there were much more
it was in
production.
summer stock, though. It was
Yeah.
his job. But the story I want to tell was that I discovered Carol Burnett. She was in California at UCLA, and I spoke to her graduating class, which was about the size of this room. And we spoke for, I think, 3 hours. A dialogue for 3 hours. And the big question was not how to do a characterization, not how to conceive and dedicate and delineate a part. No, how do you get a job? So that was where do I live? How much money do I need? These things. So we just dealt with all of this. And I said the problem was to have an agency or work. And so I said that the rehearsal club was a place that a girl could stay if she was afraid of the wild streets of New York and all those things that might be in it, at least until she got used to the idea, whatever. So the next thing I knew, about 2 months later, I got a card from Carol Burnett saying, on the strength of what you suggested that day, I live at the rehearsal club and we are putting on a show. Every girl who lives there who was in the theater, we are giving this giant show at... there's a rehearsal hall upstairs, or an auditorium upstairs above in Carnegie Hall, one of those.
Yes.
Yeah, recital.
Whatever. Yeah.
Recital hall.
Yeah. And so she said, I hate to bother you, but would you come? Well, I saw 14 amateurs, one after the other, get up there and be embarrassed. And, I suffered for all of them. And then all of a sudden came on Carol Burnett, who never knew everything then that she knows now, only she's done it more often. And she was absolutely, totally commanding, brilliant, funny, marvelous. She closed the first act with a baseball number. And she closed the second act with monotonous, but not sung the way Eartha Kitt did it. And I rushed out. I went backstage. She said, "You came?" I said, "Yes." And I said, so then I went and called all the agents I could think of. I did not call you at the time, because I didn't know you then. And I know now that if I had, you'd have come.
Yeah.
But I told all of these people, I said, you want a star? I mean, not just a talent. You want a major star. Come. Only one agent came that I knew about. The following week, she called me and said, can I come and see you? I said, sure. So she came up and she said, I don't know who to sign with. Everybody wants me. I said, such a problem. Everyone should only have. So I said, may I suggest that you go with the agent you like the best? Because I said, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think anybody can stop you.
We're going to have to take
That's what she said.
Henry,
we're going to have to take a break now, Isabel,
Because
and then
you're going to
we'll
change
come
the
back
tape.
to your question. You have more to ask?
Not for Mr. Gold.
Oh, okay.
well, I think there are questions that will be asked of the rest of the panelists. But while we're taking this break, I'd like to tell you more about the American Theater Wing.
and ask everyone here to please think about volunteering for us. We need volunteers desperately. I'm going to repeat this at the end of the program, but I thought I'd take this point now too, because the wing has other programs beside the seminars. We send live theater into hospitals and institutions. I think that, are you trying to tell me something?
What kind of volunteers?
Nitty-gritty work in the office, making telephone calls, finding people in Broadway shows who will go out to our hospital programs, who will do our Saturday theater for children programs, which go into public schools in the elementary school age, and then also booking people. We have, for example, cast, Shenandoah is a very good example. While Shenandoah was playing, members of the cast condensed a version of Shenandoah down to a 45-minute program, and this went on long after the show closed. It went into hospitals and schools for us, and institutions. We need people to organize that kind of thing, and it means making telephone calls and doing mailings, and really just an hour or two, but say, yes, I can come into the wing, and I will do that. And Bill Riley, who is our program director, has sign-up sheets, and if you would talk to Bill and give us your name and address, we'd be so grateful to you if you would come in. The wing started as a volunteer program, and Jean Dalrymple, who was in it from the very beginning, might be able to tell you a little bit more about our start, and this is a continuation of it. I'm going to talk now until we're ready to go back on, or are we ready to go back on now? Bill will be in the front. Bill Riley, would you come here for a second? This is Bill Riley, and this is our program director of the American Theater. Bill has settled.
Anybody who's looking to sign up, when you check in at the doors in front, at that desk, there will be volunteers who will take your name and address. We need help with all sorts of things. We can do this more often. And not only that, to be able to send Broadway.
Milton, when you find that talent, how do you begin to help them? What do you do first?
Well, again, as Raul said, there's no one way, there's no formula that one can use. You try to get them a job. In a play, you may have read a script and think the boy is right for it, the girl is right for it, and you send them up to read for that role. If you have been in the business as long as I have, and you have a decent reputation, casting directors respect your judgment, and they will see that actor. And that's what the actor means. How do I get an agent who can open doors for me? But I really didn't finish my answer to the young man here. I think at the beginning, it's very tough for me to tell this to all of you, and I know it's not going to be a popular statement, but you've really got to find your own jobs most of the time. And the way to do that, of course, is to, I suppose, read Backstage or any of those papers and audition. Go to every off-Broadway audition you possibly can to try to get an off-Broadway showcase, hoping that some agent or an agent's brother or somebody will see you and come back and report on the actor. Another way of doing it, you should all see as many plays as you possibly can and know the cost of tickets. That's not easy, but Equity used to have some free tickets. I don't know whether they do anymore or not for the shows that aren't selling out. And then if you see a role that you think you're suited for, go back and see the stage manager and ask if you can leave a picture, and if there are any readings for replacements or for understudies, if they would consider you. I think that's helpful, and I think that often works. But I would recommend those of you who are fresh out of school, and I don't know how many of you are, to try to get into regional theater work. So many young actors, again, in America, this is especially true, want to be in the scene of the action. They want to be in New York City where it all happens. But you've really got to go out and learn your trade, because what happens in New York, if you do get lucky and you get a play, they want to sign you for 2 years or a year, and that's not a growth process for an actor. An actor needs to get as many roles as he can under his belt. He's got to stretch himself and find out the dimensions of his talent. And you're not going to get that by playing one role for 2 years. And producers will maybe settle for a year. They want 18 months. But that's death, I think, to an actor's development. But if you are working in a regional situation, you'll get to play many parts, some small, some larger, and you will learn your craft, which I think is the only, and I think that's the only way to do it.
No alternative.
No alternative to that. Yes, Celeste.
I got my first job through the New York Times. I've lost several the same way.
Very good.
However, what I did was to keep those little index files that people keep recipes. I kept a card file on all the producers in New York, all the plays that were planned by reading the Times theater columns and the backstage and all those things, and keep a list of what's going on. And then at first, when you can't get in to see the producer because they're casting, you go to see them when they're not casting. And get to talk to them, because they really haven't got a lot to do, And they're sitting there reading scripts and not feeling very sure about anything, and so it's kind of nice to talk to somebody that wants to talk to them. And that means that when they are casting, they'll remember you. And also sometimes it's helpful to get to know the secretaries. I remember that wonderful story about Florence McGee when she was secretary to Herman Shumlin, and Herman never spoke to actors. He just went out and looked at them and very depressing. And so finally, Florence McGee went to this. They were casting something called The Children's Hour by Lillian Hellman, and about a girls' school. And the secretary said they want kids, and so she went out and bought sneakers and a pleated skirt and a midi blouse, and came in and got the job. He'd turned her down before. Now, I mean, you say, well, this is pretty unimaginative for a producer. No. They do not see you unless you somehow fit into a preconceived idea. Sometimes the secretary can tell you what it is they want, so you don't come in looking entirely different from the concept that they have of the part. This way, by the time you've been in New York a year, you know a great many people. You also meet a lot of actors that way, because they also are prowling around the offices. And in this way, you exchange information and find out what's going on.
We have another question from Milton here.
There's one question.
I'm sorry, Brenda. Yeah.
Another problem that I have found, I've encountered, and perhaps other people have as well, replacing someone in a show after the reviews are out, the agents have come, to get the agents to see the show again. I have a friend, a lovely woman at ICM, who says, I love you, but don't make me sit through that again. And really, because I'm the fourth person playing this role now. It's so incredibly difficult. I mean, you're doing something. They say, let's see you do something. I'm doing this. Oh, no. Any suggestions?
Well, that is true. I know that I must have seen Same Time Next Year about 14 or 15 times already. And I've gone down to Asbury Park, New Jersey to see Catherine Crosby play it. I've seen every replacement of the Broadway show. And last night there was a screening of the film, and I refused to go. I think, again, Maynard Morris, who was a wonderful agent at MCA who died some years ago, when he retired from the agency field, he said to a friend, this is the happiest day of my life. From now on, I'll only have to see a play once. I think, again, you have a good friend at ICM. I would ask her to try to come or get somebody to come.
Let her see one scene. Ask her to come
Sure,
in and
they
see
don't
her
have to see the whole
just
thing.
one good scene.
A big number.
Your big number, yes.
Yeah. Well, it's,
What is the
it's
show?
a good idea. Magic show. 5 years.
It's a long time.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, I'll do something about that. Let me know, and I'll get somebody there.
Well done.
I have a question for Mr. Goldman. Excuse me. Theater is for the young, but there are a few of us who've been around a hell of a long time. We're in there, thank you, and we're batting. We do regional theater, we do stock, we do commercials, and sometimes there are periods when we don't do any of those things. Have you had in your experience times when you've seen talent, in a character talent, and said, yes, that's what I want? Could you tell us some instances where you have picked up talent that is not new talent, that has its own special brilliance and its own special appeal? That it's something that you say, yes, this will go. That has finally developed to a form so you say, hey, this is something I missed before. Have you had that in your experience?
Well, I think so. Earlier I spoke about new, exciting young players, but I am a senior agent in the business. I've been around a long time, and my first theater experience was back in 1929 when I saw a summer production at the old Henry Miller Theater of Journey's End. And so all the older actors have a special appeal for me because I saw them in their great performances. And I represent most of the veteran actors, I think, in the theater today, from Lillian Gish and Ruth Gordon and Kathleen Nesbitt. You know, if they're under 80, there's a rarity. And I've seen actors who have not had a break, and then suddenly they get the role that sends them to stardom. And that happens rarely, but it does happen, and that's why actors, I think, keep on going, like Willie Loman with Hope and a Smile, until they may get that break. Jack Guilford is a client, and Jack had many, many lean years, especially the Blacklist years, when nobody would see him. I was an agent starting out at that time, and because of my own political beliefs, I never hesitated to send a blacklisted actor up for a job or call about it. Well, I can't tell you how many actors have now with me because of those years, and I didn't do it for any devious reason or because I was trying to earn brownie points with the client, but because I believed I was against the blacklisting of actors, and it was a terrible, terrible period. Jack was with me, and he is with me today, and Jack's career has moved steadily forward now. He's not a young man, and it's just grown. Bonner Hughes, who should have been here, I first saw... He's doing a film. He's doing Father Brown Detective.
It's a job you got him.
What's that?
It's a job you got him, so it's your fault.
Bonner Hughes, I saw about 30 years ago in an Equity Library theater. That's another source, Equity Library, theater production. He did 2 plays that year. It was 1947, I think, when the year I became an agent. He did Major Joppolo in A Bell for Adano and Dr. Sloper in The Heiress. Remember, this is 31 years ago.
He played that originally?
No, this is Equity Library. He did an Equity Library. And I was enormously impressed with his talent. He became a client, and he is still my client. The play Da, I went to Olney, Maryland to see 5 years ago because it was written for a client of mine, the late John McIver. John was doing a play there called Enter a Free Man, and every night, by Tom Stoppard, every night after the performance, they'd all get around in the green room, or the equivalent of the green room, and they'd drink and tell stories. And Hugh Leonard, whose real name is Jack Bright, I think, or something of that sort. What? Keys. Jack Keys would tell stories about his old Da. And Jim Waring, who directed the play there and is director at Catholic University and a teacher at Catholic University, said, "Why don't you write a play about your old Da?" He said, "I would if I could find an actor to play it." And he looked around the room and suddenly looked at John McIver and said, "You're my Da." And he wrote the play for John McIver, and I went down to Olney and I saw it, and I fell in love with the play. It was then sent from Olney to, well, it got rave notices from all the Baltimore critics, all the Washington critics, and then a client of mine who operated a theater in Chicago where Celestis appeared, I know, the Ivanhoe Theater, George Keithley.
Now closed.
Now closed. George took the play to Chicago, and again it got rave notices there. And I tried to interest, I didn't represent the play, but I did want it to get on Broadway, and I tried to interest producers, and I never lost faith in that play for 5 years. And Gil Parker, who's the agent for the play, will tell you, I sent it to more people than he did, and I called more people. And to this day, everybody comes up to me and says, "Gee, I should have listened to you. The play you sent me went on and on." But they all said, an Irish play won't work on Broadway. And I said, it's not an Irish play. It's about people who happen to be Irish, but that's incidental. And at any rate, John McIver died, and I said to Barney Hughes, who had just done a series, "Doc," I said, "you've got to do this play, and we've got to protect it for you. Let's take an option on the play." So Barney took an option on the play for 6 months. And at the end of that time, the Craig Anderson decided he wanted to do it at the Hudson Guild, and Barney agreed he would do it there. And we started at the Hudson Guild, and then, of course, it came to Broadway, and Barney is now starring in it. And it's been an enormous success.
Well, Barney's an example of an actor who I've always thought of as a character actor, and has worked all his life as a...
But as I said, Henry,
and suddenly
it takes
he's a
character
star.
actors longer to
That's
get going.
right. He started with that.
He was a character actor. He and his wife, Helen Stemborg, is a marvelous actress and who works often with the Circle Repertory. She just recently did Lanford Wilson's The 5th of July. Started the Tent House Theater in Chicago, where $200 a week or $250 a week was a big salary, and they were the resident character actor and character actress. Tom Bosley was in the company, and Tom said, "They're Willie Loman." Barney's Willie Loman, and his wife's Mrs. Loman, whatever her name is, I've forgotten the first name. Linda. Willie and Linda Loman was the 2 best performances he'd ever seen. And Barney went everywhere. He did the, well, another story about Barney, and I'm sorry he's not here to hear all this, but he was doing an off-Broadway play at the American Place Theater called Hogan's Goat by William Alfred, who was a university professor, and Faye Dunaway. I'd put Faye Dunaway in it, too. And Barney was also understudying Henry Fonda, who was doing a play called Generation at the Morosco Theater. Opening night of Hogan's Goat, the curtain went up at 7 o'clock. At 7:30, Barney got a telephone call that Henry Fonda was ill and would not be able to play that night. Barney finished the first act of Hogan's Goat, rushed over to the Morosco Theater and played Generation, and got rave notices for both.
We have another question out here.
Yeah, I'm a Canadian student studying in New York, and I've sort of given up hope on finding work here. Is it possible for me to legally find work as an actor?
I think not. You have the alien problem.
Yeah.
And until you can solve that by getting a green card, which are impossible to get, I believe, now, you can't be employed for work here.
So there's...
The English and the Canadians have the same problem. It used to be there was a reciprocal agreement between Canada and the U.S. with equity, but now it's just as difficult for a Canadian actor, unless he has a resident alien card, to work in this country.
Does that work as well for England?
Yes, it does.
Oh, so I just want to know why that you can't...
I'm curious as to why. Why is it so difficult?
To
get a green card because about 3 months ago, immigration withdrew all green cards, I'm told. And
withdrew them?
Not giving green cards.
But why the people who already have them can still
That's
use
all right.
them?
That's all right. So that's what happened was that a lot of English actors came over here, got green cards, and then went back and just came in every once in a while to keep the card alive. And those English actors who were in America, and American actors too, and rightfully so, I think, we have a case in point with an actor who had created a role up in Buffalo, was let out of the show when it was done for Broadway, and an English actor was brought over.
Ooh.
And that happens. And of course, the American actor feels rightfully, very often, that he has lost a job to a non-American. However, I would like to see the doors open on both sides. I'd like to see a free interchange of talent. And I think...
Since I'm on the Alien Committee at Equity, I want to say a little bit that this really came about because Britain closed the doors to us, as did Canada. And
I'll tell you my story about that. Go ahead. Please. No, go ahead. No, you go.
That's all I want to say.
No, I was asked to do Gone with the Wind in England. The contract was set. The British Equity gave me permission to work. I got my airline's ticket, and the permission was withdrawn. I had quit a job to take this job.
Hadn't shaved your head, though.
No, I hadn't shaved the head. Had to go back to the producer and say, you know, it's all fallen through. What should we do? And the actor who they'd replaced said, please take it. I don't even know the lines yet. Take it back. They hired a Canadian actor who at that time, now this is about 5 years ago, was able to work in the United States and England and here. But I was, and Canada, in his own country. So therefore, I was at that time being prejudiced against. You know, I really felt that, particularly since if they'd hired a British actor, fine. But to hire a Canadian, I didn't think it's quite fair.
Yeah.
But that's true. Joe Layton.
Well, how do you feel about this being on the council? What
I'm not on council. I'm just on the Alien Committee. I've gone through a lot of feelings about it. Ideally, I would like the doors to be open all over the world. Unfortunately, whenever you have high unemployment, as you do in Britain, as you do in this country with actors, there has to be some closing of doors. And I think that we have to close them so we can get more employment for our own actors.
So then it's a closing of doors all over.
Yes, but the doors, what we're saying is the doors have been closed to us first. It's really the truth. I mean, when I was with Fair Lady, which imported a lot of British actors for the show, I was an American in the company, and what is it, 5% it used to be? Mm-hmm. This has all been changed, so I speak from another time. The producer at the time would bring an actor over who was not a star in England and give him star billing, which allowed him to work in America. I'm not convinced that there were not American actors that could not play those parts.
No,
particularly as the show progressed, became a bus and truck tour, whatever.
Oh, sure.
They still use these same British actors that they brought over and given them star billing.
Well, last season, was it last season? The production of Sherlock Holmes they were going to replace the actor for the bus and truck tour with an American actor of some stature, very well known as a result of television, and was canceled in something like 5 places in this country because an English actor was not playing it. That really made me mad. Because there's a kind of unconscious snobbery.
Yes, there is that.
Well, and it's been perpetuated by the fact that we have had British actors in these roles for so many years. There's a very happy ending to the story that Milton told about the American actor who played it up in Buffalo and was replaced by a British actor. The British actor is no longer going to play the role because the writer and the director want the American actor again.
Oh, good.
That's nice. That is nice.
But the American actor is not a star, is he?
Yes, I would say he was. I think anybody's a star. You give him a good enough role.
Good for you, Joan. Good for you. There's something, one time a producer said to me, he said, "Why aren't you a star?" I said, "Because no one has given me a star part."
Right.
Yeah.
Simple. It's as simple as that.
I've had a lot of discussions with Don Grody and people about this subject of whether or not we should allow open casting. And I think that you have to put a pressure on the plays to try the American people to see if they will work. I mean, I've seen plays like The Rehearsal, the Jean Anouilh play, which was done by the British cast, and I thought could have been done much better by an American cast. And in that case, I think the pressure should have been put on the producers to do it. On the other hand, sometimes a producer knows just the right actor, and he happens to be British or Canadian or Latin American or whatever it is, and I think that he should be allowed to use him. And particularly in regional theaters, sometimes they want to get one particular actor to come in and play a role.
No, then we don't have a training ground for young actors. If we
I don't mean that they should have the whole company.
No, but I'm saying but
then seems to be an occasional star.
Then Americans are playing secondary parts again. When is a kid going to be able to go out and play the star part and play, except in our regional theater and in our summer stock?
Right.
So I mean, that's our training ground. It's the only training ground we have. Is that in the university theater? And if we start importing people to play parts in regional theaters, then the star parts will be played by people that are not training our own actors.
But they rarely do that.
No, of course they rarely do that, dear. But
out of a dozen leading roles in a year, why couldn't you have one that is played by a very distinguished visiting actor?
Well, they do that in universities. There's the guest artist situation. Yeah, it's wonderful.
It should be a guest artist.
Yeah.
John, how did you come to Shenandoah? Where did you come from? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to make one point, which may seem a little capricious, but you know, it's very interesting that there are times when the English seem to love Americans. Now, it seems that, for instance, if American actors were free to appear over there, then we're so damn mad about the British actors, then the British would be free to perform here, because, in other words, you're making jobs on both sides of the Atlantic.
Exactly.
Whereas this way you're closing doors. I always think it's
I just want to say what Equity is trying to do now, just to let you know. They're trying to make a reciprocity a one-for-one. If a producer wants to bring an actor over here, they say, okay, then you make sure that we get one of our actors performing in Britain.
I think that's a good idea. I do want to say one thing about musical comedy in Great Britain. Now, for instance, I Wish You Were Here was a failure because it was cast all British. The British did not have that particular thing that they needed. Annie is an exception. It's a hit over there. But many, many American shows have failed because they've been done by British casts, because the British did not allow American casts to come over. So it's not just us.
No.
You know, we're not the villains in this. Really.
No, I'm not.
You know, I mean,
labeling
I want to
anything.
make that
I'm only
point.
saying the result is what I'm interested
even
in.
Guys and Dolls, which the opening night was terrible. They booed Vivian Blaine because she was an American and felt that she shouldn't be there playing it.
Oh my dear.
Yeah.
And it was a terrible situation.
I'd like to see a British do that.
Well, I mean, I don't know what happened in that production. I think she was, you know, she could only work a certain amount of time. I think now it's 6 months, isn't it? You can work 6 months. But those rules are constantly changing, and I do think that there will be something worked out eventually. It has to be.
That has to be.
We want to get some questions from the audience, and if you... yes, go ahead.
Isabel asked John a question.
John's awfully quiet.
Yeah, you're quiet, John.
Well, it's such a wonderful people to listen to. I really have little to
But
say.
you know, you have a lot to say, and I want to know what brought you to Broadway. What I know you have Good Speed and Shenandoah and all of that. Can you quickly go back and tell us where you were before then and before Milton Goldman and Alexis Smith?
You know, all the way to the beginning?
Well, not quite the beginning, but
That's the one.
almost.
Well, I was not going to become an actor. Was working in my father's business and taking a master's in finance, and had made up my mind not to become an actor. I was doing theater in the regional theater there, which since has become quite good. They have,
What theater is that, John?
It's at the University of Tennessee. They had a thing called Carousel. They now have the Clarence Brown Theater, in which Anthony Quayle has been the resident actor, and they've done quite a few productions. They've asked me to come down there, but I can't afford to. Really can't, because my career is not established that solidly. But I was not going to try to do it because I knew that I was 26 years old, and I knew that there was going to be a lot of problems. And when I came to New York, I had recommendations to a very big agent at the time, and he met me and said, I advise you to go back to Knoxville. And I said, well, I'm not going to go back to Knoxville. He said, look, there's nothing I can tell you to do. And he apologized for saying it because he heard my thick Southern accent. But he said, the only thing I can tell you to do is to go down to 50th Street and Broadway and buy show business and follow up all the leads, which I did. And I was working within 2 weeks. And within 4 weeks, I had 2 jobs and had gotten in my first Shakespearean play. I had a terrible thing happen at home, and I had to leave. And I never got the momentum again after that I initially had. But it took me a long time to get going again. But I had to do what everybody else does. My first job that I got, I walked in and said, look, I'll work in your filing department and help you with, it was the Phoenix Theater. And after I'd been there for 4 days, coming in, I was the first person to get there in the day, and I was the last person to leave in the evening. And after 4 days, Norris Houghton was so embarrassed. They were looking for 6'4" people. He said, well, maybe we can squeeze in one short soldier. So that's how I got into that, my first production.
What show was that, John?
It was Siobhan McKenna's St. John.
St. John.
And then from there, everybody was auditioning for Shakespeare. And I found out where this place was. And they called me Tennessee because I had such a Southern accent. And I went over and bought a $1 copy of Shakespeare and went through Hamlet and learned, naturally picked the prose section, but I'd never done Shakespeare. But it came very easy to me because I was brought up on the King James Version of the Bible. So I ended up, I was the last person out of 1,000 people to read for Hamlet. And I prepared this big speech to do Alas, Poor Yorick. So then this girl said, you know, I was sitting out there waiting about 4 hours, and she said, why don't you read for Laertes? I'm sure they've got the Hamlet cast. So I said, okay. And I whipped over and started reading Laertes. They finally brought me in at the end, and then they said, Mr. Coleman, we understand you have something prepared. I said, yes, but I'd like to. And they said, well, do what you prepared. And by this time, Alas, Poor Yorick had gone out. So I said, this is, and I had this, I said, this is the skull. I said alas, poor, I said, let me start again. Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio. Excuse me. Finally, I tried it 3 times. I said, look, I know you've got the Hamlet, but let me read Laertes. So I read Laertes, and I read it pretty well, and I was still saying, let me read something in the stage manager. They were, you know, they'd read 500 people, and the stage manager was dragging me on. And the director said, there's a strange quality about it. So he called me back and asked me to read the Rosencrantz. And then I got a call the next day. I was working in the office at the Phoenix. I was still working in their office and doing the spear carrying at night and that sort of thing. And I talked to this stage manager, and he said, we'd like for you to do the Rosencrantz and double as Marcellus. I said, gee, those are awfully small roles. See, I'd been playing nothing but leads for at the University of Tennessee. So I said, could I let you know? He said, well, we have to know very shortly. And I said, no. He said, yeah, I'll have to know by the end of the day. I said, all right. So I hung up, and I went, and I was typing and filing cards, and I finally said, you know, they want me to do this Marcellus. And the whole office, you know, had been calling me Tennessee, and all the rest of the people had been auditioning for the roles, and they got very quiet. And the guy came over and just picked me up and took me back to the telephone. He says, "You call him up." And that's how I got in. I was doing 2 shows within about 4 weeks after I came to New York.
Well, Marcellus has one very good speech in that opening scene.
Oh, yeah. Marcellus is a good role. I know that now.
Did you have a southern accent when you read for Laertes?
I don't really have a southern accent, or it's not that bad.
See ya.
Not when you do Shakespeare, you know. Even then, when I read Shakespeare, the to be or not to be, that is the question whether it is noble in the mind, just disappeared. Of course, you can to be or not to be, like go. That's the question. That's right. When I did on a clear day, because I played a psychiatrist, they insisted that I do it with a Viennese accent.
Oh dear.
I have the worst. All of my accents are the same. No matter whether I play
You're
Russian
Southern Viennese.
I was a guest artist. I was a guest artist with the Irish players. Helena Gallagher.
Helena Carroll.
Yeah, her father wrote me. Shadows was that she wiped me off the stage. But my accent was the same as it always sounds like Bela Lugosi. But they had to hide behind that accent on.
There's your successor.
Let me say something.
Yes.
I'd like to say something to all of you. You see, he went into an office. He didn't go in as an actor, but he was in a theater office. And that's the same thing you can do with the American Theater Wing. In a way, that's a theater office. So come and volunteer. You'll have a foot in the door.
Well, I think they're almost, but not quite the same as being in the producer's office. That's very important. And I think Raul also being stage managing, ushering, doing anything that you possibly can to be around the theater while you're learning.
We're going to open this to questions, and anybody who wants to ask a question, there are 2 microphones, and you please go back there, and we'll take you in turn. But there's a woman standing back there now.
Yes, well, I thought of a million things since I've been standing here. And I just want to say to Miss Dalrymple that I work for the American Stanislavski Theater, and Mrs. Moore asked me to say hello. But getting back to why I'm here, this is for Mr. Julia. I was wondering about any specific problems you might have had taking over a role that had been so synonymous with the actor who had done it originally. And if there were any, other than the cape problem, any special problems.
No, I didn't have any.
Okay, next question.
I didn't have any problems, really. No problems about that. I just didn't. The cast was very supportive. From the very first day, well, first I did it in Baltimore and in Washington before I did it here on Broadway with a different cast. The national company that continued, now they're touring other states. And then I came here to Broadway to do it, and from the first day, the cast, I never felt anything but support. It was like I had been playing for them for a long time. I had met some of them before. I had worked with Jerry Dempsey, who plays Dr. Van Helsing. They were really great. I really felt at home, and I just did it like I had been doing it, and I'm still doing it, so I didn't have any problems about that.
Did you worry for yourself about copying rather than creating for yourself?
For about 5 minutes. I didn't, not even for 5 minutes. I tell you why. Because it's okay for me to copy. And the more I make it okay, the less I copy.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
Do I have another question here?
Yeah, we have one over here. Yeah, I have a question for the, is this right? I have a question for the actors, if anybody finds this interesting. It's a general question which I'd like someone or some people to answer with specific instances about roles. It has to do with the process of rehearsing. What work can be done alone, what work you need a partner for, when do you really know you're ready to give a performance, what happens during the course of a performance. I know it's a I know it's a very general question, but I also know that it makes some sense. I mean, it's not a dumb question, I don't think. Ask one of those questions?
Why don't you start with one question? It's
Okay.
become a lot of questions.
Okay, then how do you begin to work on a role?
I read the script.
A lot.
I agree with Celeste. You learn your lines. I mean, I'm very basic. And with a news show, you have a lot of lines to learn because you're going to learn them one night, they're going to be changed the next. And the only way that I can work is to learn what I've been given to learn absolutely cold, word for word. Absolutely cold. Whatever
I find a
script is
tape
given.
recorder is very helpful.
Very helpful in learning.
That is
Because the next night,
it's really a wonderful device.
It's a great aid.
then the next night, those lines will be changed, and you can only change something that you know thoroughly.
Yes.
You cannot put a change on top of a change.
That's right.
But you
At the
also
time
have
that
to
when
know
she-
the character, as Jane explained. She was searching for the character. There had not been a woman Supreme Court justice before. That, too, you had to find.
I think everybody does it a little differently. I don't learn my lines before. I find it impeding. Except if I'm doing Shakespeare, I acquaint myself very, very well with the material. And long speeches, I always try. I have to work on alone. I mean, you have to if you have 3 pages of dialogue. I don't know how else you do it. Not in Shakespeare, but in other things.
Do you try to find ordinarily a prototype for the part you're playing? I mean, do you think of a particular historical person when you're playing not just this role, but other roles? I know that Jerry Lawrence, who wrote First Monday in October, did a lot of interviewing of 2 justices who were not Supreme Court, but they were the lower court.
Well, he likes to think it's Shirley Hofstadler House. However, Shirley could never be considered a conservative by any stretch of the imagination. So, no, to answer, I don't usually look for prototypes necessarily. I found paintings very valuable to me and photographs, and I'll spend a lot of time in museums and in going through old photographs and things. And if I'm playing a true historical character, then it's a whole different cup of tea. Then I really do immerse myself in the life of that person.
Like Eleanor Roosevelt.
Like Eleanor.
Well, I think what you achieved in Eleanor Roosevelt was amazing.
Yeah.
Because you made her not only a historical figure, but a woman. I must compliment you on that.
Aren't there times when you as actors have to say, well, this would go over big at this moment in terms of wowing them in the audience, but it's not really. I'll pay for it later on.
Oh, yeah.
In the play when the whole character adds up.
Once upon a time, I was in a play called The Time of Your Life. It was my first play on Broadway. And I was playing with Eddie Dowling. And Eddie Dowling had a great deal of experience in vaudeville, and he was very, very susceptible to audiences. And one night we had a bunch of feather merchants out front who would just laugh at anything. And so I stood in the wings waiting for this exquisite love scene, which we played together with a woman who was meeting a man for the first time. And by the end of the scene, which was 12 minutes, he said, "Would it surprise you very much if I told you that I loved you?" And she said, "No." And that was all. And how to do that in 12 minutes? So, of course, the thing of it was that they were talking about things that they both loved. So for that time, it was as though they loved each other. It was a very interesting scene. And that night, I heard Eddie playing it drunk. I mean, really, soused. And so I thought, oh, God, just before I walked on, I thought, how's this going to work? So he started guessing my name on the purse, Madge Leibowitz. He was having a terrible time with it. And I thought, so I, of course, immediately had to make a total readjustment. Because what would such a lady do under those conditions? Would she feel sorry for him? She'd still see the person that was underneath, but still. So I played the whole scene entirely differently. Of course, when he slobbered out that thing at the end, I looked rather embarrassed and said, no. Of course, the didn't get a hand, but it was, you know, and I came off so angry. I could have torn down the set bit by bit. And Charlie Desheim, who played the bartender, was one of the best actors I ever knew in my life. He died prematurely, much prematurely. And I said, he said, listen, I'm not going to tell you how to play dirty, but you've got to learn how to protect. Oh, I forgot. Most important thing, in the middle of it, about the third speech in, he suddenly reached for a handkerchief, straightened it out, and went, you know, gross. So this really was an off-putter, you know. And so the audience thought it was a scream. So so Charlie had said to me, I'm not going to tell you how to play dirty, but you've got to figure out something to protect yourself so that can never happen again. Because if you start playing dirty with each other, that just throws the show completely. So I thought and thought and thought. I didn't sleep much that night, but you know, in my drawer, in every girl's drawer, is a handkerchief that your aunt gave you. It's this much linen, that much lace. It's only if you're going to be a waitress. But so I brought this precious handkerchief to the theater, and I put it in my purse so that there was just sticking out the end. So everything the next night, he was lovely. It was just wonderful, and we got our scene back, and it was so nice. So everything was fine. About 2 weeks later, boom, another bunch of gigglers, and he was off again. And so Ace was fumbling around, and he reached for before he could get his handkerchief out, I had mine. Now, there was no tablecloth on the table, and he was sitting at one table, I was sitting at another. And so, without changing anything, I just tore that white handkerchief. And, of course, nobody looked at anything. Well, the end of the scene, of course, we didn't get our hand. I think the audience was rather confused. I don't blame them. And he never said a word to me about it. I never said a word to him. He never did it again, and I never did it again.
Don't you think scene stealing doesn't happen as much in the theater as it used to in the 20 years ago?
Well, I don't think that it's really... I agree with you. I don't think there's much of that sort of thing. First of all, you don't have what I call bravura speeches written so that you can kind of do that. I think that the wonderful thing about the theater, it is a beehive, and every bee knows exactly what it has to do in order to make that beehive survive. That's one of the marvelous things about the theater. We are part of a beehive. And let's hope we make honey.
Question here.
Yes, thank you. This was supposed to be to Mr. Goldman, but perhaps to the rest of you. We're hearing about the difficulties of the new young face starting out, coming to New York. I have a handicap. I'm from New York, and I was waiting for my big break in social work, which didn't come. And I've returned, and I am now a new, older face, beginning to make the rounds. I've gotten a few showcases, and I'm wondering whether there isn't an inferred prejudice that if by 38 you haven't made it by now, you know, that I can say I've had another rich life of doing things, but theater was underneath. Now I'm making theater my A item. So I guess to simplify it, is there something about starting out at this age that is even more... Is there something I can do to overcome that
Only
prejudice?
get a good part.
Yeah.
Just keep...
That's all.
I think if you absolutely have to be in the theater, that you should be in the theater even if you're not very good. And I'm not saying you're not very good. But I'm saying that, in other words, even if you haven't made it financially in the theater, it seems to me that almost everybody I know who's in the theater just couldn't be anywhere else.
I don't know what you mean by making it, though. This term of making it, as though there was some special moment where you crossed the threshold and from then on everything was gravy. It's not that way.
Never.
It never is that way.
It's too bad Barney Hughes isn't here. He can tell you.
He'll tell you. Right.
I was in a production of Hamlet, you see, with Burton's Hamlet, in which Barney played the Catholic priest, which is just the smallest of roles. Phil Coolidge, who was a good American actor, has done a lot of things. He's dead now, but and done television series. But he played Cornelius, who doesn't have but just maybe 2 little words, just to be in that company.
Sure.
And and my God, I've had more breaks than I've deserved, and haven't done anything with them. It's taken me a long time. I've been up and down and up and down, and don't expect that it won't. I don't expect it to change either. You got to keep scrambling all the time. Your career never stays the same.
You know, when the show closed, you're out of a job.
That's right.
I mean, I don't care how big a star you are.
Well, first there was a young man
Doesn't matter.
in Chorus Line who was making a rather stunning impact, as everyone did really in Chorus Line. There was such a wonderful opportunity for individuality. That, of course, was the point of the show, that out of this group of enormous individuals, by working together, they could form this marvelous effect. Well, he called me, and it was just before, no, let's see, it was just before the Tonys. And he was terribly excited because he was a nominee, and he wanted to know what this would do to change his life if he were to win, and what he should do about that. Should he go to Hollywood? Should he get an agent in Hollywood? And I just said, no, just keep right on doing what you're doing and doing it wonderfully as though it were the first performance every night, because they haven't seen it before. They don't know how wonderful you are. You've got to tell them. You've got to show them every night. And then I said, if it comes, it will come to you. You can't, there's no particular, thing that you've got the best leverage in the world, and the fact that you are doing a wonderful thing which pleases audiences every night, what the hell more do you want? So he then went to Hollywood, and nothing much happened.
Jane, when you won a Tony, did you feel that you could rest on that, or?
No, you never can. There's an old saying that you've got 3 years to ride on an award or any kind of accolade in this business. 3 years, yeah. And it seems to be pretty, and then you got to really hustle again. I think you're always hustling.
Oh, I do too. I do too.
What do you think, Raul?
Yes. What she asked about age.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I've been getting geriatric ingenue roles. I've been having very I love working. I've been, somebody made a joke the other day. I said, I have 3 no-pay jobs I can choose from. And he said, soon you'll be rolling in no dough. And I feel very young because after years of working in what I really didn't want, because, that's what I should do, I'm now doing what I want. I'm delighted. I'm really learning and growing and happy. But I'm now at the stage where I'm moving in towards agents, and their perception, 2 or 3 people who saw the play assumed, not having met me, that here's an actress on the, the showcase, doing showcases. She's such and such an age. Aha, she's still there. Is that part of the thing is, of course, not allowing others to define me, but I guess I'm trying to get some strength from you, really, rather than an answer.
I don't think it's never too late to start. And I take an example of Florence Bates. Remember Florence Bates?
Yeah.
She was a lawyer, and she wanted to be an actress. And so at the age of 55 or 60, she became one of the finest character actresses in films.
Margaret Rutherford.
Margaret Rutherford started very late. So just keep going, and if it's for you, it'll happen.
And certainly there's nothing pejorative about performing in a showcase. I mean, I'm sure that under certain situations, everybody on this platform would do a showcase production.
I think that's one of the things that
Didn't you showcase on Trip Back Down?
No, I took over from the showcase.
Oh, that's right.
I couldn't afford to do showcase.
Well, it's hard. You don't even get to...
Also, when you're in a showcase, the chances that usually you go with that showcase if anything happens to it. So if you get in the right showcase, well, then that's always part of
Thank
it.
you very much.
It's always a gamble.
I think it used to be that people would say, if I appear in a showcase, that means that I'm not terribly good. But now, all the good people do it.
Now there used to be a group called Iaston, or there should be more like that, where you could really stretch yourself here in New York. And I do believe in those. I'm not talking about showcases with new properties, but taking the classics and getting together and doing them or reading them. I think that's terribly valuable.
I think there are many such in New York now.
But Iaston dealt mainly in European properties.
I did a show there. I did an Electra, and it was a fine cast of well-known people. They brought over Dimitri Rondiris, who was the director of the National Theatre.
Did they pay adequate salary?
No, they didn't pay
salary.
anything.
It was the same as the showcase. This was what, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
About. I did 8 shows there. I did everything from a Japanese no drama to a Spanish classic to a Dutch morality play, and I will always be grateful for Iaston for giving me that chance to stretch myself.
Yeah.
Is it still going? Because it's marvelous.
It's ready here.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Raul Julia and Jane Alexander what you think of method acting, what it means to you, and if it helps you to sustain a role over a long run.
Raul, go ahead.
I have no idea what method acting is.
Me too.
You tell me. I really don't know.
I'll tell you.
What is method? You ask the question, so you tell me what you think method acting is.
I think it's, well, I've read some Stanislavski, and I believe that Uta Hagen's book, Respect for Acting, has something of that in it. I think it has to do with for every moment in a play, to find corresponding moments or ideas or feelings in your own life to motivate you.
But a good writer will do that for you.
Yeah, I know.
That was bad writing that you have to dig around like that.
Yeah, I think that.
And very often you press the wrong button if you do that.
Uh-huh.
You know, you press the mother and the father button when you should be pressing a very aged aunt.
You know, I think.
You know what I mean?
You know, I
too much emotion with the situation.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? I forgot what it's called.
Method really.
No, the greatest. Oh, go ahead. No, the greatest method actors in the world were the Lunds.
Absolutely.
And they were the first ones to not know anything about it. I mean, you must motivate.
I've read the scripts of Edwin Booth, his Hamlets, and the annotations and notations that he made. And you talk about a method, he had an incredibly naturalistic approach to acting. If that's what you
Well, I think all good actors have their own method of achieving this, and
you find your own way of
method
doing
can
it.
be helpful. But I think that this idea of the method alone is going to get you anywhere is very
Well, you know,
limited.
she described it in a very specific way of relating something that's personal to you.
Of course.
And also she said something about keeping a role alive, which is true. When you've done you don't find people, American method actors don't usually end up in shows that last for 2 years. They don't usually play them that long. But in musical comedy, quite often you do. And you do have a problem of keeping a role fresh. And I guess I would use the equivalent of that. If I have a toothache, I relate to the toothache on the stage. If a scene's going dull, I use my great uncle if it's a Southern role or somebody else, or I even may do it like Richard Burton or something.
Well, let me ask you a very simple
That may not be a very good method, but it does help.
Let me ask you a very simple question. If you have to cry on stage, do you have a quick method of making yourself cry, or do you have to do it organically?
Well, Shakespeare recommends an onion wrapped in a handkerchief.
I didn't mean to be facetious in my response to you, which was me too. But I have certainly read all the books. I have great respect for Stanislavski's books and for Uta Hagen's Respect for Acting. I did not study in any of these fields, and I would say that I do use what's called the magic if once in a while, that if I were this person, how do I relate it and all that. I think we all do that. But basically, I do not use a substitute. I am that person when I finish my rehearsal process, or when I reach the point where I am that person, you know. So that as to crying on stage or anything, that becomes part of the whole organic situation.
It always comes. We don't have to.
Well, it does for me now, but it takes years of working and having the opportunity to explore those kinds of roles and those kinds of emotions.
I'm sorry to have to interrupt now, but I'm told that we have to stop the seminars, which are so interesting and so very valuable. But these are the American Theater Wing seminars on working in the theater, and they are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. I have to thank you. And I want to thank Mr. Robert Isaacson, who is director of Cumbin, and his staff, Mr. Peter Levy, Mr. Donald Pascoe, Mr. Robert Richfield. The seminars are being beamed into the classrooms and over Cumbin, which is the educational network of the City University of New York. We need volunteers. I have to remind you once more, the American Theater Wing has programs such as the seminars, also hospital shows in which Broadway cast are being brought into the hospitals. We need people to come to the wing office and to help us with that. Thank you very much for coming.
The about it.